concerns from any of the departments?
No, coming to the board and asking for a special permit was one of the several conditions that the Board of Health placed on the conditional hotel or motel license that they granted to the applicant. So this is just one of the conditions that they're working on. And my understanding is they still have several other that they're working on.
Yes, pretty much everything is done, just like a curtains on the windows. Those are windows treatment, and a couple of other things need to get done. Other thing that pretty much everything is ready to go. Some minor things only, like I just said, like 85% is pretty much everything is done. We have some pictures if you would like to see. We will show you the pictures.
David?
Can you tell us, maybe just summarize the changes you've made? You know, you mentioned the windows, but what other changes have you made?
Some have my partner, another partner.
Hello everyone. My name is...
Identify yourself for the record.
Yes. Hi. My name is Kadam Patel. I am the manager at the motel, which is going to be called a Minuteman Inn. We already placed the new sign, which is one of the change, but we just changed the, we are not changing the billboard or anything. We are just changing the name. We are not going to do any major outside changes. Mostly we are working on the inside cosmetic work. We are installing new heating system, and the interior changes, like we are changing the floors and paint. Pretty much we are not changing the outside of the property.
Okay, thank you.
So heating system we put as a P-TEC system, so no more those wall or anything like that. So P-TEC system is like a window system, so that does heat and cooling both on every room. So every single unit, they have their own P-TEC system. So like no worry about the centralized. We don't have any central heat. So those are the P-TEC system now. So does everything.
I just have one more question for the town manager. Do you know why the Board of Health asked the Board of Selectmen to vote on this? Is there a specific reason? And why a special permit is required here?
Yes. Generally, I understand it to be that this motel was built before zoning and operated for many years. And over the last year, we worked very closely with the current owners and then the previous owners to try to bring the property into a better conditions. And so part of one of the things that they needed to do, since their license to operate a motel had lapsed, was to reapply. And upon reapplying, the Board of Health listed several conditions that would need to be complied with in order for them to grant a full license. So, for example, they would require renovation of certain units within 60 days, renovation of other units within 120 days, renovation of other units within 180 days. They actually granted an extension to that through February 20th to do that renovation work. They had to replace the pool. There was a pool there that had been in disrepair and it was a hazard, so they took care of that. They're working on many of the other 14 conditions that the Board of Health directed them to do so this summer. And the fact that they didn't have a special permit to use the property in that fashion was just something that needed to be cleaned up. So this is just taking care of that.
Thank you. And just one more question. Are for these renovations that the town manager mentioned, are you on schedule to have these completed by February?
Yes. We are ahead of that schedule.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
John?
Yeah. So am I correct that you're changing your customer base to a traditional motel where people who are traveling through on business or are visiting the area will come and stay there?
Yes, correct.
As opposed to renting it out for housing by the week or housing by
No,
the
no,
month?
no, we're going to do as a daily basis, like you walk in and check out next day, something like that, you know.
Okay,
not like that.
but no,
No rooming houses.
not rooming,
No,
the
not
rooming
rooming
house, okay.
houses. That's
So-
what we had before, like rooming houses, the previous owner. That's why we are struggling right now pretty much since last February, since we closed the property. We didn't have we are taking care of all the tenants we had before.
So all of the young children, the families with young children are out of there?
Yeah, it was, no, not anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, thank you very, very much
You're welcome.
for stepping up with your own money and really changing what was a very problematic and very sad situation. Thank you.
Dean, do you have anything?
No questions.
I just have a question about the water. You do know where it comes in and how to turn it on and off?
Yes. Yes, right now we are pretty much all in the sense of the water system. We knew before that, some period, even the previous owner did not know where the main source is. But we have changed the whole system from the main line to every room. We change every pipe, every room. Every room has a different shut-off for the separate room. So yes, we have basically all ideas where the water comes and goes.
Okay. And the new pool has it covered?
No, we fill up the pool. We do not have any pool right now.
We cover with all sands and.
Oh, well.
Yeah, we close the pool.
Okay, okay. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Tara, you have a question?
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. A couple comments and a couple questions. So first of all, questions. There was evictions of the young families and people suffering from poverty. Last year, I think there were over 50 evictions. Is that correct? How many people were kicked out effectively? Some, I suppose, went voluntarily and some were through the courts. But I'd like to know, just for the record, how many people were effectively forced out. And this was in the middle of the winter last year, so I'd like to know, because for me, at least, this is our homeless shelter. And, you know, just for the record, I would be in favor of my tax dollars used for vouchers to stay there, okay? So, because I am not the only person that has got to go there in the middle of the night, and you're gonna have 24/7 people there too? You're gonna have somebody living on site? Okay, so I love the idea that the name has changed, because I didn't like the idea of the Concordia being in Acton, and the Concord car auction will come in for you next. No, I'm only kidding. And so the vouchers, and so yes, so I want to just, for the record, how many people were forced out, and where are they now?
John?
That's a quick.
Even my wife is asking me where I'm right now.
So that was we had, when we bought the property, the previous owner, they gave us a file. They already got the court order and the execution order, around 16 eviction notice. We got it from the previous owner. We did not had to actually execute many of those orders. I think we had to do only one eviction by our by our company, right? Most of them, they moved by themselves. Only we, as long as I was there in the property since last 6 months, I stays there and I manage the property 24/7. So I can be sure that we did not have to force anyone to go out of the property. Although they already served the eviction notice, but somehow we were able to manage through talk and through understanding. They were ready to move, and so we can work out our project. Yeah.
All right, is there any other question? Is there a motion?
I would like to know, where are these people, 54 people?
We don't know.
Okay. 16, no, but I was in the Board of Health. I was in the Board of Health, in the Board of Health hearings, they were talking about, was it 54 or 51 people that were being asked to leave, 51, 54, so it might have changed to 16, you start the legal process and people go in the other direction, but I still think that they're people, and they were suffering from poverty, I believe, and I'd like to know where they are. John, you had said that you were helping them with social services, and I'd just like to know that everybody's okay.
We provide several different resources to people that were looking to relocate or find places to go. We don't know where they all are, but anyone that came to us, we provided a full suite of services available.
Okay. Is there a motion? Further discussion?
Okay, I would move that we approve the use special permit. I move that we approve use special permit number 103119-477 pursuant to sections 3.5.7 and 10.3 of the Acton zoning bylaw.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to number 5. Discuss amendments to the Piper Lane Memorandum of Agreement. We're still in session, so if you're going to have a discussion, please have it out in the hallway.
The memorandum of agreement before you is an extension of the agreement that was executed by the board earlier this calendar year, and it was approved by the Board of Appeals last week, or signed by the Board of Appeals last week.
Other questions from the board?
So, this is merely an extension of time for the hearing process from 180 days from July 15th, 2019 to 300 days from July 15th, 2019 to approximately May 10th, 2020, and then 40 days thereafter for the CBA to render their decision. Is that correct?
Yes, all the other terms remained intact.
If there's no further discussion, then I would be prepared to move that we approve the First Amendment to the Memorandum of Agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do we have to wait to hear from Brian?
Unfortunately.
There'll be a brief recess. Oh, wait a minute. Can we take up? Oh, no, we can't do that. That's part of it. Tara?
So I guess you have to wait until 7:45 because it's a public hearing, but I'd like to ask a question that has nothing to do with the actual presentation or decision. It's a future forward question about tax classification, just to spend some time because we got like half hour.
15 minutes.
15 minutes. Can I?
What's the question?
Oh, okay, the question is, I wonder whether or not it's legal, advisable, et cetera, to legal and advisable to pass to consider a special tax classification for very large stores who probably would pay the bill but not even think about it, and to help protect the local small stores. And I'd like Brian to address that. Just to see if, I think I brought it up again, but I don't remember the answer. And I think that the more our local businesses struggle, the more I'd like to consider that.
John,
We can look into that.
thank you. Okay, anybody whistle? hearing. The Board of Selectmen will hold their required annual public hearing on the issue of tax classification on December 16th, 2019 at 7:45 p.m. in the Faulkner Hearing Room 204 of the Acton Town Hall. The Selectmen are required to hold this hearing annually and receive taxpayer comments as to whether the various classes of taxable property shall be taxed at the same rate or whether different tax rates shall be applied to different classes of property. The hearing will include a presentation by the Board of Assessors detailing the options available under Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws. And we have Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Selectmen. So tonight's classification hearing is a specific time-scheduled hearing as required by state law. So in this hearing tonight, we're going to have some decisions that need to be made before we can go ahead with State Department of Revenue and certify our tax rate. So the Board of Assessors' current makeup is Carol Leipner-Sreednick, Chair, and then Susan Miller. Unfortunately, they both had work obligations and family obligations and couldn't be here this evening, so you're stuck with me. So what is tax classification? So basically, tax classification is basically determining how that tax levy is going to be put upon the various classes of property. And what I mean by that, we have four major classes. We have residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property. So tonight's decision will impact on how that tax levy is going to be applied to those various classes of property. So tonight's hearing, there's going to be four specific votes that need to be taken. So the first vote, which must be taken, is to adopt a residential factor. The second vote and the third vote and the fourth vote are basic options, and that would be whether or not to adopt an open space discount, whether or not to adopt a residential exemption, and whether or not to adopt a small commercial exemption. So just for comparison from FY19 to FY20, I got a little chart here just to kind of show you where valuations are going and the increase year over year, and what does that mean to the various classes of property. So under the first section, SRF, that's a single-family residence, we can see the valuation last year was $584,000 and change. This year it's going to settle in at almost $613,000, so about a $28,000 increase. Then we have the average commercial, average industrial, and average personal property accounts. And so you can see where those are currently trending. So again, just a little more detail and breakout on the average single-family valuation and tax bill. So the valuation delta between last year and this year on average is about $28,000 or a 4.9% increase. The proposed tax rate right now, given a uniform tax rate, which is a residential factor of 1, results in that rate at $19.24. So you can see that's coming down this year. The average tax bill, unfortunately, due to the increase in the valuations, is still going up. How does that compare to the average commercial industrial valuation? Well, that's about $971,000, so about a $20,000 difference, a 2% overall change. That annual tax bill is going up about 1.5%, so you can say not at the same pace or same level as the residential sector. So again, Selectmen's decisions, the adoption of a residential factor, you have to adopt this, it's not an option. Again, this basically will shift the tax burden if you so wish. If the factor is less than 1, if it's greater than, or if it's 1, it's actually applying the tax rate evenly to the CIP classes, which we commonly refer to as the commercial, industrial, personal property classes, as well as the residence. So for instance, a $500,000 single-family home would pay the same tax bill as a $500,000 commercial property. So adopt a residential factor. So first we have to determine the percentage of the tax levy borne by each class, and the assessors do that. So basically there's very specific classes of property that the assessments go into various buckets: residential sector, commercial sector, industrial, and personal property. That's done, that's been approved and signed off by the State Department of Revenue. So in Acton's particular case, we can shift up to 150% over to the commercial, industrial, and personal property accounts. So you can take 50% of the tax burden from the residents and you can put it on the commercial, industrial, and personal property. Why would you do this? Well, you would help mitigate the increases in the residential bills, but you're also putting an excess burden on the CIP classes. So again, the adoption of a residential factor of 1 means we have one uniform rate for everybody in town. So a $500,000 commercial property pays the same rate as a $500,000 residential property. If you adopt a factor of less than 1, that means you're shifting the burden. And an easy way to, I guess, explain that is you could do it in multiples of 5 if you wish, a 5% shift, a 10% shift, which we have done in the past many years ago. In fact, we've had a uniform tax rate for the last 19 years. So example of this would be with that single-family home, the current proposed tax rate's $19.24. If we did a 5% shift, it would be $19.12. That would mitigate that bill by $74. Then you can see it compounding. So if you go to a 20% shift, the rate would come down to $18.77 for the residential class, and they would get a $288 reduction in their bill. On the flip side, the average commercial valuation of $984,000, a 5% shift would impact them by $946. A 20% shift would be $3,782. So it's really compounded because they have a much smaller share of the total tax levy. So the adoption of a residential factor, again, a factor of less than 1 shifts those burdens, and if that's the wish of the board, I think the easiest way to do it is to shift it in multiples or percentages as opposed to adopting a residential factor, but anything less than 1 would ultimately shift that burden from the residential classes to the CIP. Again, last year, Acton's residential factor was 1, as I stated earlier, and for the last 19 years it was 1. So next would be to adopt an open space discount. Well, currently we have no parcels classified as open space. They're either in a current program other than open space, or those open space parcels are tax exempt. They have a tax exempt status. Adopt a residential exemption. So what this does, it reduces the principal value of a taxpayer's resident with certain exclusions, and it's borne by the other properties in its class. And what I mean by that is up to 35% of the average assessed value of all residential classes of property could be shifted from that average to those above the average. So basically, it's a shift within the residential class. Those on the lower end get a tax rate, those on the higher end get assessed with a higher rate. We've never adopted this, and frankly, we don't recommend it. It's very complicated. Very few communities in the Commonwealth of Mass have done this. And frankly, we don't even know if our tax billing system could handle it. So on the same, we have something very similar called a small commercial exemption. So this reduces the taxable value of businesses up to 10%. Those eligible businesses are determined by Department of Employment Training. They provide us a list every year. It's about 300 or so businesses. But what they don't do is they don't fully investigate whether those businesses would be eligible or not, because those businesses have to have a valuation of less than $1 million and no more than 10 employees on average. So the business may not own the real estate. They could be located in a building that has a valuation of less than $1 million. Then they may be eligible. However, that benefit is not necessarily passed on to the business owner, because the benefit actually goes to the property owner. So in this particular case, this shift is an internal shift between the commercial industrial and not the personal property. So now you would have a separate bill or tax rate for commercial industrial that's different from your personal property accounts. Again, it's a shift internally. It does not impact open space or any residential discounts. The exemption is recovered by increasing, again, the other properties within that class of property. So it's a shift internally. You're taking it from Peter and you're making Paul pay for it. Again, the town has never adopted this. We don't recommend it. It's very complicated. And again, we're not sure if the benefit is actually going to the business owner because it's the prime real estate owner that actually receives that benefit. It's whether they pass it on or not. So in summary, the selectmen have decisions to make. One is a requirement. You must adopt a residential factor. Two is whether you want to adopt an open space discount. Three is whether you want to adopt a residential exemption. And four is whether you want to adopt a small commercial exemption. Now, before you go ahead and take your votes, I just want to quickly give you staff's recommendations. So staff's recommendations right now would be to adopt a residential factor of 1, resulting in a uniform tax rate of $19.24. And the recommendation would be not to adopt an open space discount. Frankly, we have no parcels that qualify. Not to adopt a residential exemption, and not to adopt a small commercial exemption.
So all properties would be assessed.
Uniformly.
Questions? David?
I just have a maybe stupid question, but what is personal property? That's not the excise tax, is it?
No, it's a good question, David. So there's certain businesses here in town that pay a personal property tax. So for instance, if you are a corporation and some of that furniture and fixtures you own and some of that machinery in that corporation is subject to taxation, it comes with its own specific set of rules. And some of it is exempt from taxation. For instance, some machinery that's used in the conduct of business is not taxable, so it has its own set of rules. So if you think about it, furniture and fixtures in this room, if it was a certain corporation, may pay tax on these assets.
Thank you.
This also includes public utilities.
John?
Discussions ended, I would move that we adopt a residential factor of 1.0, which results in a uniform tax rate of $19.24.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Second, I would move that we not grant an open space discount.
Second.
Just see if there's any public comment, sorry.
Oh, public comment? All right, motion made and,
A motion not to grant an open space discount.
And I seconded it.
yeah, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I would move that we not adopt a residential exemption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I would move that we not adopt a small commercial exemption.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I just have a document that I need a majority of the board of selectmen to sign for submission with the tax recap. I'm going to leave it with Lisa. Thank you.
Is there any other business before the board? Is there a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Any further discussion?